Greetings and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for Monday, November 21st. Call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Let the record reflect that all councilors are present with the exception of Councilor Archer, who has been excused. With that, I'd like to invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Under item 4, general, we have 3 things this evening. And first up is to bring forward the recipient of AARP's 2022 Andrus Award for Extraordinary Public Service, and that is for Gene Saunders. Gene Saunders is the recipient of AARP's Maine's 2022 Andrus Award for Extraordinary Public Service. The award is the organization's most prestigious and is given annually to individuals who make a difference in the lives of others and bring about positive social change. Gene runs Age-Friendly Saco and is a fierce advocate for our seniors, most recently working to improve transportation options for our older residents. I, on behalf of the city, would like to offer my congratulations to Gene on receiving this award and extend our gratitude for her dedication to the city of Saco. Thank you very much, Gene Saunders. Our age-friendly liaison, Councilor Hatch, also has a few kind words. Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. In addition to the very appropriate accolades that Mayor Doyle just made about Gene Saunders related to her AARP 2022 Andrus Award, I wanted to add my own brief comments. I was part of the group involved in the early formation of Age-Friendly Saco. I served as the organization's treasurer until my appointment to the City Council in April of 2021. I currently have the good fortune, as the mayor has indicated, of serving as city liaison. Over the many years Gene and I have been connected through Age-Friendly Saco, we have had many productive brainstorming conversations. They are usually fueled by Gene's insatiable compassion to further the mission of Age-Friendly Saco. I don't think I've ever met anyone before with so many creatively productive ideas as Gene. As a somewhat pragmatic bean counter, I've always found my role in our relationship to be the one to help vet the details. During that time, I've come to understand and appreciate Gene Saunders as a genuinely caring person. We live in a world full of characters. Gene, you are a person with an abundance of character and integrity. You serve as a great example to the citizens of Saco in how to productively engage in ways to improve the fabric of our community. I can't think of a better suited volunteer ambassador for Age-Friendly Saco. You are so deserving of the AARP's 2022 Andrus Award, so congratulations. I know you will continue to give of yourself and give to the community. Doing so will serve as a great example for all of us. So congratulations.
Moving on to item B, which is mayoral proclamation, City of Saco Office of the Mayor for Small Business Saturday. Whereas the government of Saco, Maine celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community, and whereas according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 32.5 million small businesses in the United States. Small businesses represent 99.7% of firms with paid employees. Small businesses are responsible for 62% of net new jobs created since 1995, and small businesses employ 46.8% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. And whereas 79% of consumers understand the importance of supporting the small businesses in their community, on Small Business Saturday, 70% report that the day makes them want to encourage others to shop small. Independently owned retailers and 66% report that the day makes them want to shop small all year long. And whereas 58% of shoppers reported they shopped online with a small business and 54% reported they dined or ordered takeout from a small restaurant, from a small restaurant, bar, or cafe on Small Business Saturday in 2021. Whereas Saco supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our community. And whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday, now therefore I, William Doyle, Mayor of Saco, do hereby proclaim November 26, 2022 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. Thank you very much. Moving on to item C, which also goes along with Small Business Saturday, is our own organization, Saco Main Street Small Business Saturday event for November 26, 2022. Saco Main Street would like to let the public know that they will be handing out individual $5 Saco Bucks cards again this year to be redeemed at 20-plus participating downtown businesses. Through the support of generous sponsors, Saco Main Street will hand out more than 300 Saco Bucks to help encourage our community on November 26th to shop, eat, drink, and gift local. Saco Bucks can be collected, one per individual, along with a map of the participating businesses at the Saco Scoop, starting at 10 a.m. on Small Business Saturday until quantities run out. Saco Main Street is also partnering with Amex on their Shop Small campaign to highlight the value of spending money within our own communities. Through a unified national campaign, Amex, along with FedEx, Area Chamber of Commerce, and Main Street programs, will be spreading the message of how greatly local dollars spend impact to our downtowns, our neighbors, and our local quality of life. With signage, banners, and a social media rally, we hope to get our community excited to support our small businesses. That completes the general portion of tonight's agenda. We'll move on to item 5, committee correspondence to council. Any committee correspondence at this time? Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank all the residents of Camp Ellis and the surrounding neighborhoods who came out last Thursday night for an informal evening we had of fact-finding and just general questions concerning the architectural survey and whether or not there is any interest to expand the Historic Preservation District in any form in the Camp Ellis neighborhood. We got a lot of open-ended questions that I know staff will get back to a lot of the residents with, and had a good conversation, and there was a variety of opinions. And I just wanted to remind folks down there and across the city that we're going to have another one of these. We haven't scheduled it yet, but sometime in the later spring, when we'll get some more folks that couldn't make it, perhaps seasonal residents or people out of town for holidays that we missed this time, just to get some more input. But just wanted to remind everyone that the city isn't moving on anything yet. It is literally fact-finding just to see if there is any interest. And once again, I want to thank everyone who participated last Thursday.
Thank you. Any further? Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I would like to thank everyone who came out on Saturday to the Saco Museum for the preview event at the museum for the opening of the Festival of Trees. And just a reminder of some upcoming dates that we have throughout the city celebrating the holidays. We do have the Festival of Trees at the Saco Museum, which is running from November 25th through December 29th. We have Small Business Saturday on Saturday, November 26th. And as Mayor Doyle stated, you can pick up your Saco Bucks at Saco Scoop starting at 10 a.m. On Friday, December 2nd, we have the Christmas tree lighting, which will be held at the train station, 5:30 to 6:15. And we would like to thank Ray and Kathy Lund for the donation of their tree this year. December 3rd is a big day for the city, is our Holiday Downtown Festival. We will start at 9:30 with crafts at the Dyer Library. We have the Festival of Trees that opens at 10. The train station activities will be held 12 to 3, And then the ever-popular Parade of Lights will be held at 6. Then coming up on December 10th, we have the Tea with Mrs. Claus at the Dyer Library. That is by reservation, and they are filling fast, so you do want to contact the library to get in on your reservation to have tea with Mrs. Claus. And then on Sunday, the December 11th, we have the Visit with Santa. That will be 12:30 to 3 at the Saco Museum. That is just come and show up. It is a free event, and you will be able to spend that time visiting with Santa and get him your Christmas list. And I personally would like to thank all of our volunteers, our city staff, departments that make this whole holiday season special for the downtown. From all of the volunteers and staff from the museum and the library to Saco Main Street, getting up the snowflakes, and everyone that was out on Saturday putting up the lights on the poles. It is definitely a festive time, and we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further committee correspondence to council? Moving on to item 6, public comment. So far, we have one person that has signed up. That is Kelly Archer. For those wishing to speak, please go ahead and speak directly into the microphone. State your name and address for the record, and please keep the comments to 3 minutes.
Happy Thanksgiving week to all of you. I'm Kelly Archer, 185 Bradley Street. As a former ZORS member, and in regards to tonight's first reading to permitted and conditional uses in the Portland Road zoning district, I am pleased that the MPD and large storage units have been removed for consideration at this time. I am concerned with some PR language being presented for amendments. One is that ZORS member Mike Eons and former city planner Bob Hamlin's March 2021 zoning draft is still unfinished business, which addresses many of these issues, and that during last week's Planning Board City Council joint meeting, no one remembered the vetting of percentages of 70% with 30% residential in this district with nodes. I am also very concerned since we do not have an active long-range planning committee with a smart growth action plan in place, compounded with our city planner leaving as of December 2nd, that on page 11 of your packet, that the PR district's uses of multifamily dwellings 3 to 8 units, multifamily dwellings more than 8 units, both with a minimum lot sewered area per dwelling unit of 7,500 square feet, is being changed from conditional to permitted, and that the multi-unit residential project, which was blank, which means not permitted by Table 3-3 definitions, is now being also changed to permitted. If you look at the residential MDR zone with 5,000 square feet, it is listed under those 3 uses as conditional. Why would the PR district consider anything but the 234-1406 conditional use standards, and to also vet out the inclusion of the use of multi-unit residential project prior to making it permitted? I request that the council remove these 3 revised uses in the Portland Road District as permitted and keep them as stated, conditional, conditional, and blank, until the LRPC, new planner, and planning board can review Mike Eon, Bob Hamlin's spring of 2021 draft, along with the addressing the percentages, the MPD, and nodes, so Saco can obtain a reasonable mix of uses and shifting the tax burden in this district. Lastly, Mr. Mayor and City Administrator Cainrath, I am pleased that the Mayor's 2019 platform of televising the council, as well as all city boards and commissions, is coming to fruition, as I am pleased that over 300 views of the Historic Preservation Commission's Camp Ellis neighborhood meeting last Thursday was televised from council chambers on the City of Saco government Facebook page. I look forward to the planning board also being televised in the very near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's anyone else who would like to address the council, please come forward and be heard. With nobody seeking recognition, moving on from public comment to item 7 of the agenda, and that is to approve the minutes for October 24th and November 7th of 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion? On the minutes, roll call on the minutes. Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 to approve the minutes. Brings us to item 8, consent items. There are no consent items on the agenda. That brings us to action items. Item 9, there are 2 items on the agenda for this evening. Item A is on page 2 in your packet. It's a first reading, amendments to permitted and conditional uses in the PR Portland Road zoning district. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning Board members observed that some uses and developments that are currently allowed in the PR zoning district may not achieve the goals that are expressed in the ordinance or were intended by the Board and Council when the PR district was created. In advance of a more comprehensive planning effort and at the request of the Planning Board, amendments to the zoning ordinance are proposed for adoption in the near term to better reflect the goals that were expressed during the recent updates of the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan. These include changes to the permitted and conditional uses in Table 3.3, which is attached, and development of new standards for conditional uses in the PR zoning district, which are below. After discussing these amendments during 2 workshops and 2 separate public hearings, Saco's Planning Board voted 4-0 during the November 1st, 2022 meeting to forward a positive recommendation to City Council for adoption of the proposed amendments. Councilors requested additional changes to these amendments during the November 14th meeting. These changes are incorporated in the current draft amendment. I move to approve the first reading and to schedule a public hearing for December 5th, 2022.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston, then Councilor Hatch.
Thank you. So as I stated last week, I'm overall supportive of the changes, but I remain issues with how this zone feels fragmented to me. And really, I think we should proceed cautiously with these additions or changes, whether they're going from conditional to permitted, as the recent public speaker just mentioned. When it comes to multifamily dwellings, that's a concern of mine without having a clear understanding of what the master plan development standards will be. And then, again, additionally, as I brought up last week, the large vehicle sales and services, I think adding that to the entirety of the Portland Road zone really runs counterintuitive to our goal of making that retail, residential, and food, for lack of a better word, type of development or a mixed-use development that, at least from my perspective, definitely is conflicting with those uses. So I would, again, suggest that we not move that use forward into that zone at this time until we have a better look at what that zone is going forward. Outside of that, I do have a question for the planner in regards to what exactly a multi-unit residential project is by definition. I remember having that conversation during the ZORS process, and I really never was able to come up with the difference between the two as far as a multi-family dwelling and a multi-family or a multi-unit residential project.
City Planner Garnham.
Good evening, Mayor Doyle, councilors. Councilor Johnston, I had the exact same question at one time. I actually found it in my emails earlier today. My understanding is that a multi-unit residential project is basically a multi-family project that has different buildings, multiple buildings.
Okay.
So in my view, it's not really different than a multi-family project. They could be townhomes, condos, apartments, whatever, but the idea being that there are multiple buildings.
Okay, so it's not a standalone building, it would be similar to some of the projects you see in Scarborough, for example.
Potentially, yeah.
Thank you.
City Planner Gardner, you may not want to go too far. Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. First of all, I want to thank you. I thought we had a very productive, robust conversation in our joint meeting last week. I was very pleased with it. I also wanted to acknowledge and thank you for catching the tone of the conversation, and by that I mean the dialogue that we had regarding self-storage units and removing them from the chart that was there last week. So I think that was consistent with the discussion that we had last week, as is the removal of master plan development from the PR district. Again, I think consistent with the conversation and ties into, I think, what we've talked about taking our time and making sure that we vet things. In that regard, and this is just, I may be wrong on this, but if we look at the draft of Section E, additional standards for conditional uses in the PR, Portland Road, item number 2 actually references, first sentence references developed areas for new self-storage facilities, and I'm thinking that we should strike that sentence from that paragraph.
I don't disagree, Phil. That was written in there when self-storage was proposed to be conditional.
Right.
So you're right.
Okay, perfect, and I would appreciate that change. And I would like to just publicly support the discussion around the multi-unit and multifamily dwellings, and maybe even revert back to what it was, which was in 2 cases conditional, and the multi-unit residential project was left blank until we have an opportunity to really work that through. And I think, your departure is going to help us, force us to have to stop and think a little bit about that. So.
Well, I do want to point out, again, it's obviously up to you all where you go with this, but as we talked about in the last meeting, that was really about removing or reducing the redundancy that we, in tasks and requirements that we administer as staff. While I didn't prepare a neat and thorough exhibit for you all to study, basically when a project requires both site plan application, subdivision application, the conditional use application is really redundant. It really is unnecessary in my view.
I appreciate that perspective, I do. I think part of the concern is the vision that we have had for many years of taking the opportunity to try to make sure that we're able to have a reasonable balance of commercial and residential use in that zone. I think it's the last opportunity for the city to be able to shift the tax burden a little bit more towards the commercial side. And I think that's probably what's of concern. So I appreciate what you just said.
Yeah, I hear those concerns, share them. That's why I think a focused and thorough planning effort for that area is, I think, should be the priority for this department. I don't think the conditional use process helps with that at all. There's no commercial requirement to obtain conditional use approval. So, again, it's my opinion, trying to help save a little time with staff and the board, but again, I recognize that it's your ordinance.
Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In response to what Councilor Hatch had just mentioned about Section E2, when I was originally reading all this, I had the exact same thought and was actually going to suggest just what he did. Then it occurred to me that self-storage is still allowed in the BI zone, so maybe best that we don't eliminate it altogether, just reword it so that, I realize that it was intended to keep it 200 feet off of Route 1, but is that something we want to look at for the other zone that it's allowed in as well?
That's a good question, but I just want to point out that subsection E is intended only to apply to conditional uses in the Portland Road zoning district. Oh,
Okay, thank you.
forgive me.
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to make that same point, but then also to ask a procedural question. I've heard two councilors make suggestions to revisions of this document, but it's currently in the first reading. So am I correct that revisions would have to come in the form of movements to amend at this stage?
So as I indicated at the last council meeting that we talked about this, if you have amendments, please put them in to the city administrator so that they can be drafted, because you will need amendments if this moves forward, as it is an actionable item. So if you have amendments to remove or alter or change, so that we're not doing them on the fly and missing language, please get your intended amendments into the city administrator. Will draft or have them drafted for you to propose at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further discussion on this item? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. That brings us to item B on page 24 in your packet, and that is amendments to the public notice and review procedures of Saco's subdivision, site plan, and zoning ordinance. Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the public regularly express concerns about the public notice procedures for planning board review of development permit applications. Planning staff administer procedures and timelines that are established in state statutes and local ordinances, which may be inadequate because, one, technological and cultural shifts limit the types of information people obtain from newspapers, rendering the related publication requirements outdated and ineffective. Two, postal delivery of paper notices may be delayed, or the addressing information available to staff may be incorrect. Three, the radius used for the mailings may exclude persons who wish to be informed of an application and related hearings. Four, the requirements differ between application types, causing confusion for staff and for members of the public who are notified for one application type but not another. Five, requirements may be missing from Saco's revised ordinances. Further, recent events illuminated a potential conflict between review timeline requirements for determining completeness of subdivision applications, 30 days maximum, and scheduling planning board review of subdivisions, 28-day minimum. The proposed amendments will make the public notice procedures consistent for all applicable application types, will increase the minimum timelines for mailed notices, and will add an on-site signage requirement for certain applications to help inform interested parties who may not receive formal notices. They will also correct the review timeline issues in Saco's subdivision ordinance. After discussing these amendments during 2 workshops and a public hearing, Saco's Planning Board voted 4-0 during the October 18th, 2022 meeting to forward a positive recommendation to City Council for the proposed amendments. I move to approve the first reading and to schedule a public hearing for December 5th, 2022.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Brings us to item 10 of the evening, and that is new business. On page 39 in your packet, you'll see item A, a petition for city acceptance of new public street, Apple Tree Lane, and that has been assigned to Councilor Purdy. Councilor Purdy, are you okay with being the liaison?
Yes.
Thank you. And at this time, I'll call forward Assistant City Planner Shannon Chisholm.
Hello, City Council members. It's nice to meet some of you for the first time, and for others, I've already had the privilege to meet you. Did you want an overview of the project?
Just an overview, and then any questions if the councilors have any.
Okay. So Apple Tree Lane was built by Kerry Siemens of CVS Foundations LLC. He's requesting it be accepted as a new public street. When it was brought before the planning board, there were, I believe, either 2 or 3 items left for Kerry to complete. At this point in time, there are no more items on the punch list that need to be completed. So the project is considered complete to the satisfaction of DPW and the city engineer.
Thank you. Any questions from the councilors on approving Apple Tree Lane? Okay, this will be coming forward at a council meeting in the future. And then we move on to item B, which is on page 68 in your packet, also a petition for city acceptance of a new public street, and that's Eloise Way. And Councilor Purdy, you're assigned as the liaison. Are you okay with being the liaison?
Yes.
Okay. Assistant Planner Chisholm, I believe you have the honor to give us another overview and answer any questions, if there are any, so please.
Thank you very much. So this one's very similar to the last street acceptance. It was also built by Kerry Siemens of CVS Foundations LLC. And when this was brought before the planning board, they recommended a positive recommendation to the city council. And as of this moment, there is nothing left on the punch list for this street either. So it has been completed to the satisfaction of DPW and the city engineer.
Thank you. Any questions regarding Eloise Way? With no questions, we will see this again on an agenda in the future. That brings us to item C, and that is a Chapter 81 request to purchase city-owned property, 24 Lincoln Road, on page 93 in your packet. City Planner Garnham, welcome back.
Thank you. So what you have for review is a petition to purchase city-owned property that was submitted by a Garrett Harmon. He's the owner and resident of 41 Lincoln Road. That's lot 37-1, tax map 101. Mr. Harmon is requested to purchase the abutting parcel that's addressed as 24 Lincoln Road. It's lot 35 of tax map 101. Mr. Harmon doesn't have any plans to use the property. He just wants to make sure that nobody else builds anything on it. In accordance with the Chapter 81 of Saco City Code, his request was distributed to applicable staff and committee members, and with those who I heard back from, there were no concerns expressed with selling this property to Mr. Harmon. Based on its location, it can only currently be accessed by Mr. Harmon's driveway or street. And it doesn't appear to have any utility for stormwater retention or parks or anything like that. Staff universally find that there's no reason for the city to hold on to this parcel. So I won't bore you with any details. If you do have any questions for me about this petition, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions for City Planner Garnham? Council Berman.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, did this get sent to the Conservation Commission for comment also?
Yes, it did.
Perfect, thank you.
Counselor Johnston.
It might not be for you directly. Could be a question for the assessor, but would this be merged with the abutters property, so that wouldn't be two lots of record?
My understanding is that the zoning ordinance would mandate that it be merged, at least technically. I do ponder if Mr. Harmon could, were he to purchase the lot, if he could do an amendment to the subdivision to essentially move the property line. As you may know, property owners can subdivide, make two lots from one without planning board approval currently. So it wouldn't really save him much. So as far as, I'm assuming you're referring to City Solicitor's Murphy statement regarding, recording of covenants that would restrict development on this particular parcel. Whether or not that's relevant, I don't really know. I don't think it is, because of both A, the merger, B, the intended use or lack thereof, and C, the fact that Mr. Harmon could, by other means, subdivide his lot if that was his intention. I do believe it's large enough even without acquiring this property. So, was that helpful?
Yeah, it answered the question. I don't know if I was necessarily referring to Mr. Murphy's email. I was more concerned with the standalone lot as is not a buildable lot
No.
currently. It doesn't meet the zoning ordinance. In fact, looking at it, it didn't when the city acquired it back in the 70s. It's interesting from my perspective that the plans that were in from the 1930s that were in the packet, none of that neighborhood was built out that way. That's just interesting again to me. But yeah, so I guess my concern was just to ensure that that lot as is could not be built upon, whether he sells the properties in the future and then somebody else comes along and tries to build it, because it's a very small lot.
Yeah. I don't believe he could. No, I mean, even if he were to get around the provisions for non-conforming lots that are in the zoning, and the fact that there would, under that circumstance, both be under joint common ownership, I think Mr. Harmon would fail to demonstrate that he purchased it with the expectation that it be developable, by virtue of, the evidence that you've all reviewed here as the council prior to deciding to sell it. That's something that I think he would have to demonstrate with the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you. I mean, I don't see any sense in the city retaining it. As it's been indicated, it's on a private road to begin with. It seems like one of the many lots that the city has acquired, however, over the years that just sit. So it, from my perspective, makes sense to sell it to the abutter. It's of only value to him. Speaking of value, do we have an idea of what the value may be on this?
I don't.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Discussion? I'm going to hold off on asking for a liaison until Councilor Archer gets back. Okay, we will see this at a meeting in the future. With that, we're going to move on to item 10D. However, we are going to take a 5-minute recess to allow for the attorney to arrive. Okay, welcome back. 7:23. A little bit longer than a 5-minute recess. But at this time, we'll go to new business item 10D, and that is a paper streets discussion, and we'll invite up City Solicitor Tim Murphy.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I apologize for being a few minutes late. Dinner just ran a bit longer than I expected, and I thought you were going till 7:30, so my apologies for keeping
Just
you
to
waiting.
jump in, I think we did say 7:15 to 7:30, so I don't think you're technically late, so don't.
If you're in here and you're waiting on me, that's my fault. I apologize. So tonight, the mayor and the administrator thought it would be helpful if we spent a little bit of time discussing paper streets, what they mean, how they work, both for your benefit and perhaps for the benefit of the public that may be still watching tonight. We hope that's many, many people. So let me start by showing you, and this is a reasonably good example of a paper street. This, as many of you know or have seen, is a subdivision plan drawn up by a developer, architect, or landscaper, land surveyor. And as you can see, it shows a paper street. That one's coming off North Street, Buxton Road, and it is actually, as designed, intended to be just a private road, but it's designed to city standards. And what makes it a paper street is literally, it's on paper. This plan, as you can see, is signed. It gets approved by the planning board, and then off it goes up to Alfred to be recorded. And that's what makes it a paper, that particular street, a paper street. It is a street, by definition, on a recorded subdivision plan in a county court at the Registry of Deeds. It can be not simply York County, but any county in the state of Maine. Ours happen to be in York County. So what makes this particular street unique, and it's actually timely tonight, because you took up the matter of two paper streets tonight when you addressed Apple Tree Lane and Eloise Way. Those also are currently shown on recorded subdivision plans up at the Registry of Deeds. They are still in their paper form. And the developer has built them out and is essentially asking you to take them, to make them public streets. This one is not going to be offered. It's intended that it's going to stay private, but nonetheless, interestingly, once it's recorded in Alfred, even if the developer does not offer it to you, as was done in the case of Apple Tree and Eloise Way, you as a city, as do all municipalities in Maine, have a right that's called incipient dedication to actually take a paper street that is recorded on a subdivision plan and say, well, we actually want to make that a public way. We think there are important public interests that could be served by having a particular paper street converted from paper into an actual physical road on the face of the earth. Most times, we wait for the developer because we don't want to spend the money wisely. We let the developers do it. But there could be an occasion, and Maine law provides for this, where a municipality on its own decides it wants to accept a paper street. In fact, back in the mid-90s, Maine realized that there were literally hundreds and hundreds of paper streets in recorded subdivision plans throughout all the counties of Maine, and that they were becoming a problem for the towns to keep track of. There was always a question about, well, what's the status of a particular strip of land, who has rights in it, who can build in it? So the Maine Municipal Association, in conjunction with the courts and the state legislature, started to set some ground rules about these things. And they essentially created a law that said to municipalities, we're going to give you a 20-year period of time to make a decision on all the paper streets in your community. So back in 1997, Saco had dozens of paper streets on recorded subdivision plans. And Peter Morelli was former economic development director, was tasked with the mission of listing them all and making an initial determination whether the city wished to preserve its rights in some of those paper streets or whether it wanted to forego them. And those that it felt, the council felt had a particular interest or concern of potential use, future use for the city, those were scheduled on a list that was recorded up in the Registry of Deeds. The list essentially saying, we, Saco, still have an interest in a bunch of these paper streets. We'd like to preserve our rights. If we didn't list the street back in 1997, then our rights in that particular paper street evaporated. The goal of the legislature was to slowly, over time, start eliminating all these paper streets so that the abutting landowners could be assured of what their title was. And that's part of what I want to talk about in particular, is because there's confusion about these paper streets in the eyes of the public, I think, in particular. And keep in mind, these paper streets are all over the city. The bulk of them, though, tend to be down towards the waterfront or out in the North Saco area, the less developed portions of town, and also the beachfront. So there's an interest in these areas, and the confusion runs because we think of them, and perhaps the public thinks of them, because they're listed paper streets, as somehow belonging to the city of Saco. And that's kind of a misunderstanding about these paper streets. The city does have a right to accept a paper street and take title. This is this phrase called incipient dedication. It's a power of the city to come and look on this particular plan, in fact, and say to this particular road, even though the developer hasn't offered it to us, we think there's an important public right or interest here, and we'd like to build out this road and make it a public way. That's the city's right of incipient dedication. However, the underlying title in a paper street, so it's shown as paper in the Registry of Deeds, but actually the abutting landowners own to the middle of that paper street. They own, until it gets built out and is accepted by the city, technically the abutters will own to the middle section of a paper street. So they're not truly city roads until you vote to accept them. Title remains with the abutting property owners. So where this has caused some problems in the past has been the abutters don't always know they own it. We're starting to learn here at the city that even though the abutters own it, we haven't always uniformly taxed everyone for the additional land that technically they own, because we think of it as potentially a paper street and therefore might someday turn to the city. And then the third aspect of the paper streets that has been a little bit of a cause for concern is that members of the public may think they have a right to travel over these paper streets, either by vehicle, but more likely by foot. So people can begin to see them as city property, with the city, they as a member of the public being and having an opportunity to pass across the land that comprises the paper street as if it were there physically on the face of the earth. And that simply isn't the case. In many cases, people who are the abutters of paper streets, regardless of where they live in the city, tend to think of that land as theirs, and it is. And so they will put fences, sheds, shrubberies, parked vehicles, all kinds of things we found over the years end up in paper streets. And so people make good use of them, as they should. So this can cause confusion for the public if they think they might have a right to pass over these properties, because they don't understand why an abutter may have put a garage on them. Now, these abutters that do put permanent improvements like garages are certainly at some risk, because the city has the incipient right of dedication. The city can take the land, and if we want to build out a road and there's a garage on it, then the garage would have to come down. But in most cases, we're not going to take these paper streets. We might in a few, but in most, we haven't. So those tend to be the issues that we see popping up. For you, we haven't been taxing the land as if it's owned by the butters. So that's, I can say assessing is now looking at that, and at least the last information I heard, they
are being taxed.
Oh, good.
Those happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something that hasn't been done in the past. So it's good to generate an extra revenue, because the people are essentially exercising dominion and control over these parcels of land. They view them as theirs, which they are, until such time as the city chooses to accept them. I mentioned earlier that in 1997, we had set up a list of paper streets we had an interest in. This was a fairly long project by Peter. In 2017, that list was expiring, so the city went through an additional year-long process of evaluating all the remaining paper streets we still had, and we created a second list. So the city has reserved an additional 20-year period that will run out in 2037 on a condensed list of paper streets. So if we had 50 paper streets in 1997, we're probably down to 25 now in 2017. We certainly have shrunk the list because we found that some of them just aren't needed, particularly the ones that have been preserved down at the beachfront, out of concern that we assure that the public always has access to the beach if we need it. So that's kind of and I hope I haven't rushed through this, but that's kind of the status of how paper streets work. They do exist on plans. There isn't a paper street in Saco that isn't shown on a recorded subdivision plan up in Alfred. So they can be of value, but in most cases, the ones that truly matter to the city, we've already accepted. So we're going to, at some point, have to go through a reevaluation process again in probably 2036. And you're always free to dispose of some prior to that point.
And Tim, just so that in case anybody missed it, because it's an important determinative, the city has preserved its right on all the current paper streets for another 20 years until 2037.
Right. But preserving city rights are the city rights to someday take land by incipient dedication if we want to build a road. Those are not public rights to use that land. The land does belong to the abutters to the middle line. And most, we found neighbors get along, they understand sort of where the point is, and we don't go walking through their land for reasons we don't need to. So that's one thing we're trying to make sure that the public understands, because we don't want neighbors fighting neighbors over rights to walk down paper streets when it doesn't exist. And that can be any part of the city. We have paper streets in all the wards of the city.
Any questions for City Solicitor Murphy? Councilor Berman.
Some of the discussion, Solicitor Murphy, has revolved around what rights having a paper road provides to the public, especially in regards at the beach, to accessing the beach. And you mentioned that in your last phrase, that we've kept them in order to provide access to the beach, should we ever need it. Does the existence of a paper road along the beachfront provide any special rights or privileges to the public, to the city, to anything?
No, there's no special rights until we accept it. It's the fee interest belongs to the abutters, to the center line, and they can rightly exclude people. In most cases, we have preserved across the beachfront multiple points of access, because you'll see city-provided boardwalks that cross over the dune between Bayview and Kinney Shores, and also between Bayview and Camp Ellis. There are numerous access points. I was down off the Ferry Road, King Street. I was down at King Street the other day. Right at the end of King Street, there's a crossing point. My memory is at the end of Pond, there might be a crossing point. Certainly Bayview. I believe there's, towards the end at Kinney Shores, we have one near Shore Avenue. I would say there's probably, and Pat's here. Pat, how many? 10, maybe? Over a dozen? Yeah. So, I mean, quite a substantial number of access points on the beach right now, but you always are mindful of whether you need more and where they should be.
And just a follow-up question, does the existence of an access point to the beach affect the public's rights along the beach at all?
No, no, and thank you. That's a opportune question, Counselor. Sometimes we confuse the importance of access with the actual use of the beach itself. So let me describe it this way. Of the two matters, access and beach rights, access is secondary. And I'll put it to you this way. Let's assume we only had one point of access, and that was Bayview. But from Bayview, you had complete rights over the entire beach, which is the legal position the city has always taken. Well, we only need the one access point because there's no portion of the beach that we're excluded from. But flip it around. Let's say we had 50 access points, but the beach was all private and blocked off. It wouldn't matter how many access points you have if all the beachfront owners could exclude you from using the beach. So of the two matters, it's preserving rights in the beach itself that is most critical to the city. We have multiple access points. No one's ever needed to get to the beach in Saco by either a helicopter or by an offshore landing from a vessel at sea. There is no problem with getting to the beach in Saco. We are always cognizant of protecting beach rights, assuring that the public, which the public has always historically done in Saco. They've used all parts of the beach, from the top of the dune down to the water. They've recreated, they've dropped their towels, they've thrown frisbees, we've had lifeguard stands. The city's always historically used the beach. And it's the rights of use in the beach that are key. The access points are helpful because they allow us to not have to walk so far. But they're not the fundamental issue or critical issue. It's rights in the beach that are the most critical.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Tim Murphy? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. It's not so much a question. I wasn't here in 97, but I was here in 2017, and I recall it being quite a lengthy process going through the paper streets. I know that Joe Laverrier put all the documentation together, and council went through it several times before we came to what seemed like more streets than was necessary by the time we finished it. And what I specifically recall was at that time, the thought was, since it had been 20 years since 97 to 2017 that nobody had looked at those streets, it would be our goal to take up several of those streets every year so that in 2037 we weren't looking at 40 streets. And so I'm just bringing it up now because I think it kind of behooves of us not to send this off to a future council given how many hours we spent looking at those streets, because I still stand where I believe most of them really aren't needed. So I'm just throwing that out there, and perhaps it gets brought to council in the future for us to discuss.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Gunn.
I would concur with Councilor Johnson that if there's no actual plans to use something that doesn't even exist, why wait till 2037 for everything to just fall away, though, when we can be proactive about these things? And at the same time, if there are any access points that need to be improved, that's something we can focus on, but, no point in litigating things that, to Mr. Murphy's point, don't even actually exist. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. The only thing I would ask is if we could be provided a list of the existing paper streets in Saco.
Yep. Counselor, I'll have that sent over to Brian's office tomorrow morning, first thing. Sure, absolutely.
Any further discussion? City Solicitor Murphy, thank you very much.
Happy to be here, anytime, Mayor.
That concludes the paper streets discussion, and that brings us to item 11, administrative updates. City Administrator Canrath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of quick updates. First, I just want to say thank you to everyone involved in putting on the Seniority Thanksgiving event this year last week. It was a great success, well attended. We had nearly all of our department heads in the serving line serving the dinner to the residents. So thank you to everyone involved there for a great event. A couple of quick staff updates. I'd like to welcome Jason Daly as he begins his new role as one of our assistant code officers. Welcome, Jason. And we wish you many years of success here with the city of Saco. We're also currently advertising for vacant or soon-to-be vacant positions for city planner, arborist, public works, truck driver, and laborer. We also have openings in our police department patrol division. An RFP opportunity to announce the city of Saco is soliciting bids from qualified vendors that can provide sales, installation, and service for a firefighter gear washer extractor. The extractor shall be received in new condition and free from any defects from workmanship or material and be installed to factory specifications. Proposals must be submitted in a sealed envelope marked bid fire department gear extractor. Bids will be accepted until 1 p.m. on December 7th at the finance office here at City Hall. There will be a public opening of all bids received in the City Hall conference room at that time. Any questions, please direct them to our fire department and Deputy Chief Bob Martin by emailing him or calling him at his number at the fire station. Lastly, just a final reminder, as was mentioned earlier, our holiday festivities are coming up with, of course, the festival and parade on December 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for City Administrator Kainrath? With that, moving on to item 12 of the agenda, that is council discussion and comment. Any council discussion and comment this evening? Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. City Administrator Gainrath, now that this presentation by City Solicitor Murphy has become public, it's recorded, I'm wondering if we could provide a link on our communication website to folks who may have missed the meeting and need to be maybe informed a little bit more about the issue, that they at least are alerted to the fact they can observe the presentation.
I think we accomplished that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, just to note that the issue of beach access has been a really hot issue lately, and I would just encourage the city to keep looking at how to provide additional public access to the beach, and especially in regards to places to park. I know that parking has become more limited even at times when beach use have increased, and I think that's part of what's causing this to be a heated issue. And to the degree the city can add additional parking, especially near existing access points, I think that would go a long way to remediate and alleviate some of the concerns.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
City Administrator Kainrath.
Thank you. Just to respond to Councilor Berman's question, we are actively in discussions with, I won't name names right now, but property owners down there for additional parking. And we, of course, we continually always look for ways to increase beach access and parking down there. So we are actively having those discussions and hopefully have more public things to say in the near future.
Thank you.
Any further council discussion and comment? Moving on to item 13, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councilor Berman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call to adjourn. Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 to adjourn at 7:46 PM. Have a good evening.